Hello and welcome to Horrifically Obscure. I am your host, The Thing, and before we hop into what we're actually going to do today, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I came up with this idea. So for a long time, I've wanted to do YouTube, and I knew I wanted to do YouTube. I just didn't really know exactly what to do. Well, after I had decided this, I got way into reading when I was about 19 or so, and I knew I kind of wanted to combine those two things. And I thought, well, there's so many great works of literature out there. Where do I even start? I know I love horror. I know I love disturbing novels. So I kind of did some research and I came up with a really, really eloquent book that I think is just a fantastic work of literature. And that would be The Ass Goblins of Auschwitz. That's where we're starting. So as you may have already guessed, this is not your normal book YouTube channel. I'm not some guy who's going to sit here and talk about how secretly smart this work is, you know. The title is The Ass Goblins of Auschwitz. Okay, we know this is not fine literature, right? So I am not going to be the kind of guy who gives you some great, you know, secret hidden message or whatever in it. I just had a lot of fun reading it, and I thought you guys want to know about it. Now, if you are interested in buying a copy of this for yourself, you can do so below at the link in my bio. It is Outcast Society Bookstore. It is my store. We have a lot of things, and I will talk a little bit more about that at the end. Now, as you may have already guessed, this is not your typical book review. And it's really not going to be a book review at all. There are going to be spoilers all throughout this. I am more so talking about my experience reading this, and if you were curious about reading, kind of letting you know what you're about to get into. And if you're not interested in reading at all, but you think it's a funny title or a, you know, funny sounding video, or you're just curious about reading, maybe this is for you as well. There are going to be major spoilers ahead. I'm going to be talking about the entire book, not just the beginning or not leaving anything out. I'm going to be strictly talking about this, less so than reviewing. So with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So each day in this version of Auschwitz starts with what they call the apple picking ceremony. And that is when the ass goblins decide which child they are going to make into alcoholic cider that day. Yes, they ferment children and make them into alcohol. And so how they decide this is basically by having each child line up on what they call the apple picker. I think it was called, or I believe it was the apple picker. But they have them all line up and drop their pants, and they get probed, and somehow the ass goblins decide that way which child they're going to make into cider. I'm not kidding. It's gross. That is in the very beginning, so we are already starting off super fucking strong. So whenever they have picked whichever child they're going to pick, and they take him and do, you know, dispose of him, take him down to be fermented, they move on to the cafeteria and they have their breakfast. And for breakfast, these kids are fed kid skin. So it's just leftover parts of... It doesn't really say where they came from, but whichever kid happens to die, they get eaten. That's just how it is. This is... Goddamn. What a book. So during this first breakfast scene, we learn of the Goblin's Alpha, which is a bigger one, or I don't know if they even really said he was bigger, but he is like the main one, and they call him Adolf. And Adolf, much like the Austrian painter we know and hate, he is... So the goblins there, if you can see, this is what they look like, but Adolf has a mustache that takes up this entire mouth, and he walks backwards. Not kidding. Find out in this first breakfast scene where they describe what Adolf looks like, that Adolf has been missing for sometime now. It doesn't really give, I don't remember if it gives like an actual like timeline, but he is missing. So our two main characters I have not mentioned yet are number 999 and number 1001, who are conjoined twins. And it's a little hazy because I've it's been a week or so since I've read this, but at the beginning, they explained that there was some sort of mix-up when they got there, and somehow they ended up 999 and 1001, but there is a number 1000 that is not conjoined to them. I don't remember exactly how that worked out, but I do know that's a thing. And so 999 and 1001, despite being conjoined twins, have been assigned two different workstations, which they are assigned workstations every day after their healthy breakfast of kidskin. And so 1001 has been instructed to work in the bicycle factory, but number 999 has been assigned to surgery. And so obviously they can't be in two places at once, and they decide to go to the bicycle factory. And they say that surgery is like the worst place you can go. You go there basically to be experimented on, and it just seems like a nightmare, you know? So they go to the bicycle factory where they are making bicycles for the goblins out of kid parts. So all the bikes are made, the tires are made of brains, the frame of the bike is made out of skeletons, or like, you know, bones, like skeletal parts. So they go to work, 999 and 1001, and they work the whole day through. They're making bikes all day, they get a good pace going, they keep the pace, they're at the beginning of the assembly line because they were the first there, and so all they're doing is inflating tires and, sending them on, which is a disgusting process, but at this point they are just completely desensitized to it. Like, they don't even think anymore about how disgusting all of this is. I, however, do. This book was a struggle to get through, let me tell you. So for dinner, after they're finished with their work day, we get one of the grossest and most horrific scenes in this entire book. They're forced to sit on these tree stumps, and inside these tree stumps that are basically toilet shaped, they're essentially toilets. Inside of them are these creatures called toilet toads. And what they do, they probe the kid, pick an organ, pull it out, and they feed that organ to the kid. It's just as disgusting as it sounds. They go into pretty gruesome detail when explaining this. So after dinner, they go to the barracks and they, go to sleep, whatever, and they wake up the next day. And now the next day, number 1001, whose name is Otto, tells his brother, "Hey, I think number 1000 is going to die today." And number 999's like, "No, I don't think so." And at the next day at the apple picking ceremony, he is picked for the apple picking, and he is never seen again. So the next day, after the slaughter scene, number 999 is selected again for surgery, but this time number 1001 is selected to go to the doll factory. So once again, 999 blows off surgery because his brother needs to go do his job. And so they go to the doll factory, which is essentially where these kids are made to make sex dolls for the ass goblins. And they're working, and everything is, as normal as it can be. And they are ripped off the assembly line and forced to go to surgery, where they are nailed to the table, essentially. And are probably being treated even harsher than they already would be for skipping the day before. So during all of this, when number 999 wakes up from the surgery he discovers that the Ass Goblins do in fact have names. There is one named Bumblestun, and there is another goblin who's paler than the rest, and his name from here on out just becomes the White Angel. He's never named. Bumblestump so far, Bumblestump and Adolf are the only two ever named in the entire book. But this is where you get introduced to like the main antagonist. Everybody, like every goblin is obviously the antagonist, but the main antagonist becomes the White Angel from here on out. Also here that you find out that this version of Hitler has a manifesto. As you know, Hitler's real manifesto is Mein Kampf. In this one, it is Mein Poop, but it's spelled P-U-P-P. I just thought that was funny. So when 999 wakes up, he discovers that he and 1001 have been separated. They are no longer conjoined. They are two separate beings now, and they both have the relatively normal features, except for they have given 999 claws instead of hands. He has normal palms, but he has claws as fingers. And you find out, well, you don't really find out until a little bit later what has happened to number 1001. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But it's during this, or just after this, that we find out that the White Angel is pretty much taking over Auschwitz. And we also find out that Adolf is on what's called a sex odyssey. I'm assuming, sex tour or whatever. And the next day, they go to the apple picking ceremony like normal, and they get probed like normal still. However, this time, they take a needle and they put it into the right testicle of number 999, and 999 believes it also happened to 1001, but he can no longer feel it because they're not conjoined anymore. So, after the apple picking ceremony, number 1001 and 999 are both given handwritten work duties from the White Angel. Written on number 1001's handwritten work duty is to go back to surgery, and 999 goes back to the bicycle factory. And so they, go their separate ways or whatever. So while working in the bicycle factory, 999 decides, hey, I think they're trying to turn me into a goblin. I have claws just like the goblins, and he hasn't seen his face yet at this point or anything. But he knows he has some goblin genes now, or something resembling goblin genes. And so he decides, hey, I can probably say my instincts drove me to the labyrinth, which is at the end of the bicycle factory, a door that leads somewhere that the Ass Goblins go. He thinks they go down to ride bicycles, because he explains earlier they love riding bicycles. That's one of their favorite pastimes. And so he goes in to explore this labyrinth, and if he gets caught, that will be his excuse. So while exploring the labyrinth, there are two pathways he can take. The one on, I can't remember which one's left, which one's right, but there's a green path and there's a yellow path. He decides to go down the yellow path, and there are these flashing lights all throughout, until eventually it kind of goes dark, and the only light is dim yellow lights on the ceiling. And he sees that the road ahead goes into like a loop-de-loop, And there's a brick wall standing between him and this loop-de-loop. So he builds up speed and he tries to crash through the wall. And he does crash through the wall, only to find out that these bricks are foam. And he falls over. So after he recovers, he keeps trucking right along until he gets to a room that is filled with what he describes as chocolate cake. It seems to me, because it mentions this room again later on down the line, it actually is chocolate cake. When I first read that, I did not think that's what it was, but it sounds like that might actually be what it was. So he goes in to this room that's filled with chocolate cake, and he starts eating it by the handful, just eating it. And I was grossed out at this point, because again, I did not think it was chocolate cake, and I still do not know right now if it was chocolate cake. but it says it's chocolate cake, and so I'm gonna choose to have it in my brain that it was chocolate cake. So he keeps going into this room, and he eventually finds just a mountain of dead children, and they're all at different points of decay, and it makes him spit out the cake or whatever. So he makes his way up the hill, and when he makes his way up the hill, he is surrounded by toilet toads. And as you know, at this point, the toilet toads are how they get dinner. They take your organs, and so he is fucking terrified, because one is terrifying enough, and he is surrounded completely on every side of this mountain. So he jumps down the hill, and he makes his way out of the labyrinth. Now, something that I forgot to mention up until this point, I cannot remember exactly where in the story it happened. It was somewhere around this time, but somehow the bike that he's been riding this whole time shrinks down and becomes his right testicle. Has something to do with whatever they injected him with, I'm sure. But so that's a thing, and when he is making his daring escape away from all these toads or whatever, he somehow pops this thing out again. And again, it's never really super clear on how that happens, but that is a thing, and it will come back up again later. So 999 escapes the labyrinth, and he makes his way out of the labyrinth, and he's in a hallway, and there's a goblin waiting there. And you find out in this universe there are in fact guns, but they are extremely rare, because these goblins, they have the ability to slaughter people, and they have claws, and so they don't really use them much. But there is one sitting on the counter just out of the goblin's view, but just in 999's view. And so this goblin confronts him, and he's asking him, what were you doing in there? That place is forbidden. And so 999 jumps for the gun, and he fires and misses, fires and misses, fires and misses. Misses every single shot, doesn't hit one. But the White Angel comes and reprimands the goblin, who is trying to now the goblin is trying to slaughter 999, but the White Angel comes and stops him. 999 goes back to the barracks after this, and he's told, go in there. The White Angel takes him over there, has another guard looking out for him, and when he gets in there, he goes over to his normal bed, and he says, there's an ass goblin laying there with the girl I like. And he hears this goblin speak, and it's his brother. It is number 1001, also known as Otto. So even as ridiculous as the story is, it is heartbreaking, and it becomes even more heartbreaking when they describe where they came from. It was a separate planet called Kidland, which was populated entirely by kids. And 999 and 1001 were essentially school teachers on Kidland, and they taught the younger kids how to make circus outfits and stuff like that. Just some really wholesome stuff. And they had drum circles and instruments and just a bunch of fun kid stuff. It sounded basically like a utopia, and it describes, what it was like living before that, and to know what they came from and to where they ended up is just even more heartbreaking than it already was. So the next day, 999 wakes up attached to a meat hook hanging from the ceiling in his cell. And in the cell with him is Franny, a girl who he liked in Kidland, who also had a conjoined twin. Her and her twin have been separated, and so they're in this cell with him, and Otto, his brother, his former twin, former, attached twin, he is in the corner now, and he has, a goblin-like face, so basically like an ass where his face was, and the body of a spider, and he is, 10 feet tall, and they're all crammed in this cell together, and he wakes up, and they've all been instructed not to help him down, and so nobody helps him down. And eventually the White Angel comes in and lets him down, and shortly after that, they wheel in the food that they're going to be eating. And it's here when 999 realizes he's becoming more goblin like, because instead of the kid skin that he would normally eat, he goes straight for the cider. He doesn't even eat, he just drinks the kid cider. And Franny, this girl he loves or likes, whatever, is calling him a Judas and a cannibal and all this, and saying that the kid skin is necessary for survival, but the cider is just straight up cannibalism, basically. I forgot to mention too, Franny no longer looks like Franny. Franny is essentially a goblin. Like she's mutated. She has a giant mouth. No, she doesn't have like the face, but she has like the giant mouth on top and everything like that. And when she burps or pukes or whatever, she like coughs up goblin asses essentially. And Franny too, the little Franny has a toilet toad that is permanently in her, and she can fire it out at will. And it's just as disgusting in the book as it is now. I'm toning it down, obviously, but it's fuck this book, dude. So they spend a few days in this cell, and nobody really wants to talk to 999. Franny thinks Otto is just perfect. He can't control what he's doing. He's so mutated. 999 isn't super mutated, but he's becoming more goblin-like. Well, I say not super mutated. I guess he is getting pretty mutated, but he knows what he's doing. Otto can barely speak, so he doesn't know what he's doing. Well, they're sitting there, and all of a sudden, one day an alarm just starts going off. It doesn't sound like the normal morning alarm, and it doesn't sound like any of the other stuff they've heard, and it just will not stop. It's ear-piercing, it's loud, and so they decide this is the time that we escape. And so they start trying to break the door. They first have Franny 2 fire her toad at the door, does nothing, and Otto kind of slams it a couple of times, it does nothing. Well, then Franny 1 coughs up one of the goblin asses, and she kicks it at the door, and boom, it just blows a hole big enough for Otto to kind of break out of. And so they break out of here, and they're in another labyrinth, but it's not the same labyrinth, it's just like another surgery building or whatever. And so they make their way out of there, and they say, well, the only way to really get out of here is to go back to the bicycle factory, and they're going to go in the same labyrinth that 999 had explored a couple days before, and they've lost Otto. Otto was moving too fast for them by the time they made their way out, so now it is only 999, Franny, and Franny 2. And so they make their way into the bike factory, and they make their way into the labyrinth. And so it's here where we figure out that the testicle bike is still a thing. And so he pops that bad boy out, and he tells Franny, hey, put your little sister in your mouth and sit on the handlebars, we'll ride. And so he starts going, and he makes his way through the labyrinth, and they get to the brick wall just before the loop-de-loop, and they crash into it again, realize it's just foam bricks again, and he makes sure everybody's okay, and they try to keep going. Now, once they get into the chocolate cake part of the labyrinth, Franny is like, no, we need to go back for Otto, he would go back for you, all that. And he was like, well, maybe he's in the labyrinth already. Maybe we should look for him there. And so they make it back into that room, and they make it to the top of Dead Kid Hill, and they talk, and they're getting ready to turn down, or turn back and go back down, and Otto kind of shows up, and he's like, yeah, I've been here, we need to save all these kids. There's no way out of here from where we're at, so we need to fight our way out, and we're going to save as many kids as we can. And at first, 999 is a little reluctant to do this. He's like, no, there's got to be a way out of here. Maybe we can rip a hole in the wall. We need to save ourselves, essentially. And Franny 2, and Otto are all on the same page. Hey, we need to go fight and try to free us. And they're like, well, it's not our fight. So when they make their way out of the cell that they were in, they discover that the ass goblins and the dolls that they've been making, the ass dolls, are warring with each other. The dolls are shooting the goblins, and the goblins are slaughtering the dolls. So they don't necessarily have a plan, but they've decided we're gonna basically just go fight everybody, round up as many kids as we can, and go try to free as many people as possible. Well, they decide to make their way to the green path instead of the yellow path that 999 and, that everybody's already been down. And when they make their way over to the green path, they see goblins flying on bicycles past them and stuff like that, going to war with the dolls, and a lot of it's happening down there as well. So they make their way down the green path, and Otto kind of curls up, insect style, and rolls all through and is taking goblins out, and he's fighting. Well, they get to the end of the green hall, or the green path, and they are in a theater, essentially, and the White Angel is performing a play, and he halts everything and just kind of watches them fight for a little while. And 999 has figured out at this point that he has goblin wings now, just like the wings of the White Angel and some of the other goblins. And so he's flying, and he kind of flies up over, and he's watching Otto, Franny, and Franny 2 fight, and the White Death basically just halts everything. After he halts everything, a ship lands, the roof of where they're at kind of opens up, and a ship lands, and out pops Adolf. And Adolf gives this whole monologue about how toys aren't freedom, war is freedom, war leads to making more toys means more freedom, therefore war is freedom, something like that. And so he basically says, we're going to have a three-way fight. It's going to be the goblins versus the dolls versus the kids. And so it just becomes all-out war, even though it was already chaos. It gets even more chaotic. Otto was taking out onslaughts of goblins and dolls. The Frannies are fighting the goblins and dolls. It's a whole big battle going on. And well, that's when 999 starts flapping his wings and takes to the sky, and then the White Angel comes after him, and they basically fight in the air for a little while. And something interesting happens while 999 is fighting with the White Angel. So he basically tells him, your wings were not supposed to function. They were purely aesthetic to remind you who your father was. And it's revealed at this moment that the kids from Kidland have, no concept of parents. It never even explains where they come from. And so we get to a point, they just keep fighting, and Adolf and the White Angel are pretty much just out of the fight at this point entirely. And so 999 saves both the Frannies, and all three of them go and save as many kids as they can find. They were all huddled together and submissive, not even fighting. And so and blindfolded, and so they start removing blindfolds, and they say, hey, follow us, and they get to the gates of Auschwitz. Now, they open the gate, and they let all these kids out, but the main three that are left, because Otto at this point, it never really says that he died, but at this point he is surely dead. he was taking on an onslaught and he was starting to lose armor. So the main three let all these kids out. They link arms and they decide, hey, we don't belong out there anymore. These kids, they can rebuild Kidland. They can make it a utopia again. We're stuck here. This is our home now. As fucked up and disturbing as it is, this is our home. And so they join hands as the gate closes and all the kids are led to freedom and the morning siren blares. And that is the end of Ask Goblins of Auschwitz. And that concludes the Ask Goblins of Auschwitz. Boy, what a time it was. And now, it's time for my favorite part of all of this. We are going to use a state-of-the-art system that I have come up with to select our next book. Missed. That hit? Nope, just the board, not the board. Damn. There we go. Did I hit the note? Yes, I did. The next book is going to be The Nymphomaniacs of Big Top Island. Well, that sure was a lot of fun for me. If you guys are interested in what I do here and you want to support the channel, consider buying a book from Outcast Society Bookstore, linked down in the description below. Consider subscribing or leaving a like on this video. And join me next time for The Nymphomaniacs of Big Top Island. This has been Horrifically Obscure. I've been your host, The Thing, and I wish you a good night.